You can have one virtuoso musician in a band, or you can have a superb singer in another band. It sort of functions all right around that, but you get four musicians who are really the top, the creme de la creme. Even that isn't necessarily going to work if they play together. With the four of us, it took on a fifth element, which is what you hear.
Hey, mama said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove.
Let's go back to the 1960s, the birthplace of all of your favorite genres of rock and spin-offs, with the craziest, most important, influential band to everything you love. We're of course talking about the screaming Robert Plant, the sex criminal, sex pest Jimmy Page on guitar, John Bonham, the expert alcoholic, and Pope John Paul Jones.
The idea of Led Zeppelin I that I had was that it was going to be a guitar tour de force. However, it was not going to be at the expense of the other musicians, so everyone was going to be featured. We knew that there was so much power, even from the first song that we actually got together and played together. By the end of this, whatever it was, 5 minutes that we just played, it was like, well, this is phenomenal.
Good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, but I still don't seem to care.
So we've heard a million times before, and it's no secret that Jimmy Page, who's pretty much the mastermind of this project, started out in a band with Jeff Beck called the Yardbirds that were very influential.
In England, we had a producer who was superb for singles, but it wasn't superb. The sort of choices that he was making for the Yardbirds were like mixing oil and water. Just wasn't working. And we would be able to sort of feel as though we were saving ourselves by doing a B-side, which was more in character with what we were doing. It was all a bit hopeless and desperate. And I really didn't like all of that, you know, singles market. And you could see how that carries on through the Led Zeppelin years.
He spun off into something called the New Yardbirds, making by accident a supergroup of people that no one had heard of at this point. Picking the weakest link of this band is very impossible, and I will, throughout some of the songs we feature in this episode, show you why each member is integral to the writing, sound, production, appearances, and performances of this band. They actually stole the name Led Zeppelin, though, from Keith Moon, who wanted to do his own supergroup project. I thought it'd be funny to make a band called Led Zeppelin, just like the Hindenburg, how it went down like a Led Zeppelin and crashed and burned. The band wrote and arranged every single song of this first album extremely quickly, and Jimmy Page wanted it to be a guitar tour de force, but he knew very quickly that this is something completely unheard of at the point. So every single song here borderline creates a new genre of music.
That were just about getting to the point where they were playing whole sides of albums. If you had an album that had each track would set up the second track, there would be such a diversity upon the album of different styles and different moods that it would capture people's imagination when they listened to it.
The opening track, Good Times, Bad Times, showing off why John Bonham was such an iconic, groovy-ass drummer, but ultimately being the first hard rock song of all time. And the Communication Breakdown, a fan favorite ditty that basically created punk rock. We're talking before the Ramones. If you want to pick any other band other than Led Zeppelin that had created a punk rock song, you're not going to beat them, because they wrote this back when they were at the tail end of the Yardbirds, the beginning of the New Yardbirds.
Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown, drive me insane.
Many people will argue to their heart's content who invented heavy metal, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, or you want to say Blue Cheer or something. But here's the deal. Black Sabbath, the first heavy metal band, right? The first album is about 50-50 as a metal album, but overall, most of that 70s Black Sabbath stuff and their whole career is pretty much heavy metal music. Led Zeppelin, though, on the other hand, people will point to the song here, Dazed and Confused, all the time, which predates even this album by several years, when he was, of course, with the Yardbirds. Jimmy Page had wrote a very doom metal inspired sounding riff. So How could you say that that was first when this was in the mid-60s they wrote this, and this album was still released before Black Sabbath?
What it's coming from is those sort of riffs that go right back to Chicago. The blues went from this sort of, from the acoustic, what they call the country blues, to city blues, and all the things that they were getting up to, all this sort of riff, this hypnotic sort of trance.
Take it easy, baby, let them say what they will. Don't wax so much when I send you the bill.
That being said, Dazed and Confused going on for 30 minutes is beyond excessive. Of all the songs that picked the jam over for this long, it never made sense to me. It was never just jumping off the page for it to be a song to jam on forever. And Jimmy, of course, would iconically play the guitar with a bow. Now, a lot of you are going to point out that Dazed and Confused, with several other songs in here, are not original pieces from the band, so how could they have invented heavy metal? Now, damn near half the album, when you look at the credits nowadays, is credited to either the band members and a fusion of other random artists, or just entirely to other artists and labeled as covers. Originally, the entire band was credited for writing these songs. Now, that is wrong in hindsight, because there are a lot of elements, lyrics, ideas, parts of music that inspired many of these songs, or of course they were entirely covers. What they were doing was no different than every other blues act in America at the time that they were heavily inspired by. They would come up with ideas and then fuse them with songs they really loved from the blues rock scene down in America, and then create something completely original. The original Dazed and Confused from Jake Holmes sound almost nothing at all beyond the song title and a couple little babes and baby lyrics here and there. Other than that, they're completely different, especially the music. As far as I'm concerned, even the songs that have credits to just the original artist should say credits to Jimmy Page as well, and arranged by Jimmy Page.
I'm dazed and confused, hanging on by a thread. I'm being abused, I get better off it.
And even in the case of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, the band truly adds something unique with those epic crescendo moments with Robert Plant screaming and then building the momentum, which they were always best at.
It was on an album, I thought it was a traditional number, because on that, it was a Vanguard album. I remember it had no writer, so I assumed it was traditional. And it just inspired me to come up with this whole, with the acoustic and then this sort of flamenco accents that comes in to heighten the whole drama of it.
If I had to pick the weaker moments, oddly enough, it's all the blues standards on here, which sounds crazy because they're known to be a blues hard rock band, but Led Zeppelin at their strongest when they fuse the blues rock with epic ideas or hard rocking elements, like especially my favorite song on the closing track, How Many More Times, which is a hilariously ironic title considering they tricked radio stations into playing it all the time by mislabeling the length of the song as 3 minutes. And of course, it is an 8-minute borderline psychedelic jam.
I really just wanted to be able to develop the ideas of the band as a band without, where's the single on this new album, where's the single? And I thought, well, there isn't a single. And as they had to be sort of 2 or 3 minutes long, I thought, well, the best way to deal with that is make the numbers 5 minutes long so they can't be played on radio.
How many more times? Treat me the way you wanna do.
With listening to the whole catalog of Led Zeppelin, it doesn't stand out that much nowadays, but it is so important to the history of hard rock and metal and punk rock and damn near anything else you could think of. What's funny though is every single early Led Zeppelin album, despite being more and more popular than the last, they were constantly lambasted by critics, especially Rolling Stone, who desperately tried to snuff them out in their crib.
Led Zeppelin II was written while you were on the road, touring,
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
And they were released quite quickly in succession of each other.
Yeah.
And yet, with all the pressures of being on the road and gigging, you literally pounded out this amazing second album, and it went straight in at number one in the UK and the US.
Yeah, pretty good going, eh?
One thing I do have on my mind, you can clarify these dues. So way you call me another guy's name, but I try to make love to you.
It was a word by radio. that this band was just incredible.
And the very first two concerts, the first one being Atlanta, had like 53,000 people there, and the next one, Tampa, Florida, 57, and suddenly I thought, my goodness, what's going on? You know, it's crazy. You know, it's the way that people were really just, you know, flocking to us with this great loyalty.
Now, the band was touring America, and they were immediately breaking out so quickly that the label was demanding that they rush back into the studio and produce something. We need Led Zeppelin II right away. We don't care what it is. So the band borderline wrote and recorded this whole thing in random studios on the road. Now, despite being rushed and forced beyond belief, sometimes in the 1960s and 1970s, ladies and gentlemen, that was the absolute creative spark to produce something awesome. Because despite that loss of time, they made up for it with a laser focus on what worked and what didn't work on the first album. Focusing less on standard, slow, bluesy songs and more so focusing on that balls out hard rock sound. Jimmy Page's best work is this album. His best riffs, his best solos, and it was the true guitar tour de force he wanted the first album to be. Jimmy Page gets a ton of criticism, and kind of rightfully so towards the later half of their career. He is known for having awful tone and sloppy guitar playing. But when he was in his prime in the late 60s, early 70s, and when he had that godly guitar tone, boy, you could not take away his riffing and soloing. He was on point. And even then, Jimmy Page's strongest ability was definitely his composition and creativity more than anything else. Look no further than songs like Heartbreaker, which has a heavy-ass borderline metal riff, arguably Jimmy Page's greatest guitar solo, and of course the classic Whole Lotta Love, their first breakthrough hit single, a song they once again trolled radio stations with by having tons of moaning and droning noises in the middle of the song. That being said, Willie Dixon made a fortune off these boys because they were constantly inspired by his ideas and song titles and lyrics. He made a killing off this song in particular. Now, with all the heavy guitar focus on this album, there's still some dynamics with songs like Thank You being all about Robert Plant's love for his wife, but controversially being contradicted by the second track on this album, That Is and What Should Never Be, being about Robert Plant's true story love affair with his wife's sister.
Tomorrow. Oh, what fun it all would be. Then what's to stop us, pretty baby?
Now, there's an instrumental on here called Moby Dick that is once again a piece that they play for damn near 30 minutes live because this is Bonzo's big moment, his drum solo. And it's not as impressive on album as it is live, where he'd literally throw the sticks out and start playing the drum set with his hands. People seem to throw a ton of shade on Bonzo or praise him way too much. You have the jazz heads and dickheads like Ginger Baker insist that not only was Bonzo weak, he was a terrible drummer. And you have so many people that think he's the greatest of all time. It's like, people. All right, he set an amazing precedent for having an amazing hard rock groove that was much more in line with, say, the soul drummers down in America, you know, those black blues artists, than he had anything to do with the jazz drummers, despite having a tiny bit of a jazz background.
Bonzo's favourite music was actually the slower Motown stuff. It was either James Brown or the real sweet soul music, which he loved. This is why all those bands that sort of supposedly sound like us never get it right, because it's all bash, bash. If you listen to what Bonzo did, you hear all this little stuff going on.
Obviously, people have taken his ideas and progressed from there since, okay? Can we meet in the middle here? He's awesome for what he was. The thing though is that every member of this band has been considered a superstar, overhated, overpraised to the high heavens, except for John Paul Jones, which most of us Led Zeppelin fans will agree has always been the most underrated and arguably most important piece of the puzzle other than Jimmy Page. When it came to making dynamics in the studio or adding atmosphere and just adding that extra epic element that was missing. He was always the one that would come in and add keyboard synthesizers and, of course, amazing melodic bass grooves, which can be heard on one of the most strong, underrated songs on here, Ramble On, one of the first of many songs to highlight the band's love and slavish dedication to Tolkien's works.
The darkest depths of Mordor, I met a girl so fair, but Gollum at the evil wall crept up and slipped away with her.
Picking a favorite song here is damn near impossible, and it is arguably the band's best album if you want to know the hard rock zenith of this band. The band really does bring it on home on the last track, Bring It On Home. Now it starts, interestingly enough, completely ripping off the original Willie Dixon song, and it comes and bitch smacks you across the face, being a completely original Led Zeppelin song. And this is a definite example of why it is a co-writing credit to Willie Dixon, and why it's mostly written by Led Zeppelin, is that they were inspired by that little opening piece and then went on to do something else with it.
What you trying to do? Trying to love me, baby. Love some other men too. Bring it on home. Bring it on home.
It is the ultimate starting point for the band. And despite this album having nothing but negative reviews, it was a huge success, big breakout for them, to the point that they could not be opening acts anymore. And they couldn't even get opening acts. They just played blistering 3.5-hour shows, and even broke out several famous producers making this album, like Eddie Kramer.
By the time the third album comes out, they're going, well, they've gone acoustic because Crosby, Stills and Nash are acoustic, or whatever, you know? And the reality of it is, yeah, but hang on a minute, the acoustic's all over the first album and the second album, and where's Whole Lot of Love? You know, it's just a nonsense, but it's quite amusing.
Zeppelin II was like the classic rock album, and I think they expected, I know the record company expected a follow-up to Whole Lot of Love, which obviously wasn't on this. But however, we always stuck to, you know, how we were shaping at the time anyway. We never really sort of made a point of trying to emulate something that we'd done before.
And that only makes too much sense that after the band were overworked like a slave and super successful right out the gate, that they would want to slow things down, look at what they've done. They've already achieved the perfection of hard rock and all these other musical styles that they borderline invented, so it's time to do something creative and different. The first half of this album, for the most part, is the typical style of the Led Zeppelin that we've gotten to know. Even with the opening track, Immigrant Song, being an iconic heavy metal song about Vikings and Norse mythology. He, of course, had an amazing voice that he unfortunately blew out halfway through their career, with tons of screaming, especially on songs like the Immigrant Song. But his true best work is on the slow blues epics on this album. Jimmy's most tasty blues licks are all over the song Since I've Been Loving You, but Robert Plant truly delivers not only the atmosphere, but of course the emotion of the powerful screams in this song.
Since I've been loving you, I'm about to lose
And it's ridiculous to me in the world of heavy metal that Rob Halford seems to get all the credit for being the first true metal vocalist with all the screaming. And he himself even credits Robert Plant as being the true inventor of that. And there's other great songs the first half, like Celebration Day and Out on the Tiles, which is John Bonham's first musical contribution to the band, sounding like a drunk, and the song being about a drunk dumbass stumbling all over himself. But he's an expert. What's truly interesting is the super divisive second half of this album. The band needed a change of pace, spending a ton of time at Bron Air.
But Robert and I went to into the country in Wales to an isolated cottage. It was so isolated that there was no no electricity there. Because, for instance, the second album had been recorded while we were on the road, basically, so they had all the energy of, like, you know, we were off the road, right in the middle of the countryside, and totally, you know, mellowed out, so to speak. And that reflects in the music that was written there.
And the Headley Grange studio, writing and recording what was essentially nothing but all acoustic folksy songs. Songs like Gallows Pole, Tangerine, That's the Way, and hats off to Roy Harper, which I still don't know how I feel about that song. Musically it's not bad, but them trying to do that weird vocal effect, it just sounds like someone shouting in an echo chamber.
Well, I ain't no monkey, I can't climb no tree. No brown skin mother wanna make no monkey out of me. Yeah, yeah, Buster, shake 'em all down.
If you said, if you were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say, delete that. You know? For me, that doesn't sound right or something. A guy that's kind of shouting in some kind of echo chamber.
But if I had to pick a song that is the strongest of these acoustic pieces, it's actually the one that's in the first half of the album, Friends. I love the creepy atmosphere of the song, and it's one of many pieces where the band was heavily inspired by Indian music. Everyone, including critics and fans, praised the first half of this album, but everyone hated the second half. But it was them doing their own thing on their own merits, and they didn't care what anyone thought, including the label.
It was a very inspired time for all of us at the time that we were living in the Headley Grange as a residence, eating, sleeping, making music. That's what we were doing day after day after day. And it sort of tells when you hear the fourth album. By the fourth album, where we didn't have any information at all, no title and no name of the group, and this caused quite a bit of friction with the record company. And they were bringing in all these sort of statutory books with legal this, that, and the other, and I said, well, we're not going to do it.
Now we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, a mysterious album, front to back, loaded with some of the most important classic creative and original songs. Fans will autistically argue about what this album is even supposed to be called, because they had no title, nothing, no description of this album beyond the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven, and a weird painting of some guy on the cover, and that was it. Some people have called this album Led Zeppelin IV, Untitled, ZoSo, or whatever, the symbols that represent each band member. And of course, the Jimmy Page's love for the occult. Some people think ZoSo is supposed to mean Saturn, and this album is all about Saturn worship.
Will you ever reveal the meaning behind ZoSo?
No.
And later on, Jimmy Page was going to purchase Aleister Crowley's Boleskine house. People thinking he was doing black magic there, selling a soul to the devil, creating all this. For all the people that say his band steals and plagiarizes all the black artists, that those guys were the ones that really sold their soul to the devil, and Jimmy Page just ripped off the devil. And it's not just the mystery that makes people love this album. It is, of course, the songs beginning to end. Black Dog, inspired by a black dog that would mysteriously roam around the Grange. One of the most iconic hard rock songs of all time. You take a wild guess just which member wrote Black Dog. And the band can get away with doing damn near anything at this point, with songs like Rock and Roll being a tribute to old rock and roll songs from the 1950s that the band absolutely loved. Fans even loved this. It was a hit single at the time, decades after this sound was famous, and they even got Ian Stewart from the Rolling Stones to play piano on it.
I remember Bonzo started this drum intro to Just Keep a Knocking, Little Richard. He just did that, and I just played the riff automatically. I think we got through the whole of the 12 bar of it. Well, this is great, forget 4 sticks, let's work on this, and things would come out like that.
But even doing the folk songs this time around came out much stronger, with songs like Going to California, one of my favorites from them, and of course Battle of Evermore, a song that somehow manages to be all acoustic and one of the most epic songs ever, with all the acoustic layering and of course the vocal dynamics.
John Paul Jones brought a mandolin along.
Okay.
It hadn't actually been used up to that point, and it was sitting on the piano. So I thought, I wonder how this works, and I just started playing it and getting something out of it. And before I knew where I was, I'd got the whole of the sequence of Battle of Evermore together.
Robert Plant and female vocalist Sandy Denny trade off doing who could do the better screams and more melodic approaches to the lyrics that are once again inspired by Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and Tolkien. Even Misty Mountain Hop, which is a Misty Mountain bop, is inspired by The Hobbit. And God, what has not been already said about Stairway to Heaven, a song that is super long and epic, and the radio still plays the entire damn thing, and a song that really fuses everything that works so great about this band with the heavy riffs, epic moments, acoustic build-ups, and of course incredible performances, especially from Robert Plant. Even then, you could argue that his lyrics are the best part of the song, that evoke pictures that he just paints with his words.
The idea of Stairway was to have a piece of music, a composition, whereby it would accelerate as it went through on every level, every emotional level, every musical level, and so it just keeps opening up as it continues through its sort of passage.
People will argue to their heart's content what the song is even about, but I think it truly is something that was so vague that you could apply anything to it. Of course, all the morons on the internet want to say that it's a secret message about worshiping Satan. If you play it backwards and upside down and reverse, and then you'll find some hidden message or something.
Somebody said, oh, it says My Sweet Satan in it, and I thought, oh gosh, it's hard enough writing the music one way round rather than that way.
Is it the greatest song of all time? I don't know, but it certainly has nothing wrong with it. So if you wanted to say it was, I wouldn't disagree with you. That being said, a lot of people think that the song's a giant ripoff, and they were once again taken to court, and one of the only times the band was actually able to fight off a copyright suit, and still has only the band members credited to it. But what's so great about Led Zeppelin epics is even if they're repetitive or not, in the case of Stairway where it's constantly changing, it never gets boring. And even when it's repetitive, like the greatest song on this album, the finale, blues, slow, hard-rocking epic, When the Levee Breaks, it still never gets boring, even though it's the same two things over and over, striking the perfect balance of how Led Zeppelin should approach a blues song.
We had been recording in this room here. Bonzo had ordered a new drum kit. His tech, his road manager, had set it up in the hall. And when Bonzo came out, he started playing it in this thing, and it was this huge expanse. You're getting the drums reflecting off of the walls.
They were at their peak at this point. Live shows that went on forever.
The sets got longer because the hardest and most challenging thing was, as we did a new album, we'd just keep extending the sets because you didn't want to drop anything, because all of the numbers, once they went in the set, you could have real fun with them and change them around on the night.
And they even broke the record held by the Beatles for the highest amount of sales and the #1 positions in the charts. Led Zeppelin were the new Beatles.
That feeling that's left everybody, the cosmic energy, everybody goes, yeah, bash. There were the days that the critics and press and people in general took us for being probably the innovators of hard rock, and they took us for being the band who made a whole lot of love, and Plant was the squeeze my lemon boy and all that sort of thing. The only reason that we are still together is that the subtlety of delicate change in the music.
Now, Houses of the Holy seems to be kind of ignored because it's sandwiched between the band's most loved albums, Led Zeppelin IV and Physical Graffiti. But to those of us that actually listen with our ears and not our eyes, we know that Houses of the Holy is actually the band's greatest work. One of the few albums that actually strays very far away from the typical Led Zeppelin sound. They're really just doing a different style in each song. The song remains the same. The opening track is them going off on their instruments, doing a progressive rock song with tons of musical changes and ideas. And this song, along with a couple others on this album, show off Robert Plant messing around with the idea of pitch shifting his vocals to be even higher, which really pisses people off and rubs them the wrong way. Some people just don't even like this album because they think those songs are really annoying. I can kind of understand it because he gets so nasally and high-pitched, it's kind of funny.
It was supposed to be a guitar instrumental, by the way. Robert started singing over the half-time, and what was going to be the overture suddenly becomes Song Remains the Same.
But how can you deny the song remains the same? That song is amazing. This song is so awesome that several years after this album was released, the tour for this album was recorded, and they edited together of random ideas of them like fighting people with swords and made it a movie called The Song Remains the Same. But this album offers something for everyone. Dire Maker is even a reggae song, and a fantastic one at that gets played on the radio all the time. And Robert Plant actually wanted this song to be a single just to mess with John Bonham because he hated reggae, and that's why this song has a super heavy-handed feel on the drums. And yeah, the song is supposed to be pronounced as Jamaica, but it's also a British dumb slang joke where they're like, did you make her Jamaica?
Oh, darling, please don't go.
There's a funk song on here, and even the classic song Dancing Days has them experiment with avant-garde riffs in that opening riff. And who can forget Over the Hills and Far Away, one of the band's most beloved songs, showing off that Jimmy Page was honestly at his best during these melodic songs.
Darling, darling, walk a while with me. Oh, you got so much, so much, so much.
And if you just want to rock out with some Led Zeppelin classic bluesy hard rock sound, then you go no further than The Ocean. The Rain Song, a long epic that shows off the band going from the dynamics of depressing to happy to emotional. This song was brought about because George Harrison, who must have never listened to this band's catalog, said, you guys don't have any ballads, you should write a ballad. So this was them writing the best ballad they could, and I mean, I guess other than Stairway to Heaven, this is probably the best one they got. And the epic songs in this album are honestly the best moments on here because it is showing off the secret weapon of this band, John Paul Jones, creating dense atmospherics, and the Rain Song obviously evoking so much emotion. And with the best song on here, one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs of all time, No Quarter, showing off unbelievable amounts of despair, showing the deep, dark depths of the human soul with the keyboards alone. And if you were to listen to no other song on this album, No Quarter is the song that made me truly click with this album and realize there's truly something special with it. In fact, this song turned me into a fan of the band. The reception for this was initially mixed because, of course, they're trying to do something different again, but it was accepted much faster than Led Zeppelin III ever was. And the greatest thing of all about House of the Holy You can't say that the band wasn't original if they steal and plagiarize everything. Hey, then explain why a majority of the band's songs are completely original, especially the fact that House the Holy, beginning to end, is all original songs. And it's their best work. One of the greatest albums of all time. So how could you not like House of the Holy?
We'd just gone through a real lengthy process of touring, and we had a bit of a break. The recording date was put in the schedule, and what it was to actually return back to Headley Grange, where we'd done the fourth album. We could do exactly the same thing that we did before, which was be in residence and be able to push this whole idea that we did on the fourth album even further. Even though we went in to do like a single album, I could see straight away that we could extend it and then incorporate some of these other tracks that were left over from other previous recording sessions and make a double album.
It's time to drop down, because starting with this album, the band would never be the same. Now, obviously, Physical Graffiti, it's a double album, and it's arguably their best album other than House of the Holy, along there with Led Zeppelin II. But there's so many things that either started on this album that were a problem going forward or would happen afterwards. Damn near every band that does a double album seemed to never be the same afterwards, like they were microwaved for too long or hit in the head too many times, because Robert Plant's voice was already struggling heavily. Even during the House of the Holy tour, he was struggling to hit those real high notes in songs like Black Dog. And the ending track on this album, Sick Again, really does just sound like him just letting it rip and not taking extra takes in the studio, truly showing how nasally and broken his vocals have gotten. And yeah, I get that the song is called Sick Again, he's trying to sound sick, but this is literally how he sounded live at the time. Made the Swan Song label, something just switched where Jimmy Page just couldn't help himself to have the worst guitar tone ever. This, along with his heavy drug use, is the reason so many people will hear Jimmy Page is the greatest guitar player ever, and then see footage of them on these subsequent tours and on this era of albums and think, good God, this guy sounds like a mess. Half of this album is composed of completely original new material that the band had worked up for this album, and the rest of the songs are actually leftover songs from the previous albums. But so many of these are so strong that you're kind of scratching your head. Why did they ever just put songs like The Rover or House of the Holy, the title track on House of the Holy, which would have been one of the best songs on there anyways. And I hate it when bands will leave off a track that's literally the title track and put it on a later album.
From the door comes Satan's daughter, and it only goes to show.
If you were to just have this be a singular album with only the new songs they wrote for these sessions, beginning to end, it would have been an album that's arguably even better than House of the Holy, because it would have been nothing but great, perfect songs, and the only weak songs are in that last fourth of the album. And these sessions were mostly led by John Bonham, who had them jamming in the studio, and despite him being the sloppy drunk in the band that never did as much songwriting, he really should be credited for why this album is as strong and so fresh and fiery as it is. And where this album is at its best is with the lengthy epic songs like the progressive, super bizarre, psychedelic In the Light, and of course 10 Years Gone, the band kind of trying to do another Stairway to Heaven, with the music and lyrics evoking a very strong nostalgic feeling beginning to end.
I've been doing quite a lot of work at home, and I'd worked out all the orchestration for, say, 10 Years Gone. I didn't always do that. A lot of the stuff was spontaneous, but I did want to work on something which was a guitar orchestration.
But stand back is when this album is epic. It is epic. With the song Kashmir, the band knew they had something special because this thing is only 3 riffs. It somehow keeps getting better and better as it goes along and never gets tiring.
I had a long piece of music that I'd been working on, and just on the tail end of it, I just was sort of just jamming, and I had that riff, and I thought, uh-oh, this is something I really want to try. And I started working on the riff at home, because it's around, it keeps going, you know, round and catching up with itself, and I just couldn't wait to get in Headley Grange with John Bonham and do this.
As great as this version is, of course, the P. Diddy and Jimmy Page collaboration version of the song will always be better. Because P. Diddy and Jimmy Page, they of course have one thing in common, ladies and gentlemen, and that is their love for great music. And the great thing is when they do things outside the box, most of the time on here, it is better than they've ever tried those styles before. Now, a lot of people seem to pick on the crunge off the last album for trying to do a James Brown style funk song, but the Wonton song, and especially Trampled Underfoot, blows that away. It definitely slaps harder than James Brown or even Chris Brown, mostly because, of course, John Paul Jones laying it down on the keyboard. What's insane though is him especially was less involved with this album, and he was considering leaving the band after How's the Holy because he was feeling disillusioned with the situation. Hence why John Bonham actually stepped in kind of leading the sessions, because how involved John Paul Jones was. There always needed to be one other guy with Jimmy Page gassing him up. Now, picking a best song on this album is really hard, but I think it's gotta be the epitome of what's the strongest on this album. The more raw elements, the jamming elements, the blues, and the hard rock. We're of course talking about In My Time of Dying, a song that has co-writes from the entire band, showing off all of their strengths, and who can deny how powerful this song is when they finally get into the hard rock section of the song. Now, this album's obviously not their best. It's slightly disjointed and all over the place. But even then, sometimes a diamond with a little scratch on it, it adds a character to it. And that's why so many people feel like this is their best album, because it's a lot of diversity, it's a lot of mistakes, but it's the band stripped, raw, and true to themselves. And it was such a big release and such a big hit, even more than the last album, that it put all the previous albums back in the charts again. The band had that momentum again, but could they hold on to it this time?
It was, yeah, an electric guitar album. There was no acoustic on it, and I wanted to try and make as much out of my character playing of the electric as I possibly could.
Now, with the classic era of the band over, we're left with what many consider to be the scraps and the boring, more forgettable releases of the band. Now, yeah, the band isn't changing the wheel on this. They don't do a single thing that's very original on here. In fact, the last song, the slow, lengthy blues epic T for One, is them trying to rekindle the same exact fire of Since I've Been Loving You.
I come 24 hours. Baby, sometimes seem to slip in a day.
And the band were beyond bored or depressed, and Robert Plant just wanted nothing to do with the band anymore, especially considering his vocals were blown out, and he got into a car crash that destroyed his leg and almost killed him, so he was singing in a wheelchair the entire time. And what was Bonzo doing? Being an expert alcoholic, of course, and putting on damn near 50 pounds. So with everyone wanting out this time, the band needing to put out an album, Jimmy Page, who was beyond messed up on horse tranquilizers, had to step up. And this, of all the Led Zeppelin albums, is the most guitar heavy, most rocking album beginning to end, with no ballads, with no folk songs. This is the guitar album. Now, a very thin-sounding guitar album. There's a lot of underrated songs in here, like Nobody's Fault But Mine, one of the only songs people seem to talk about from this album. And Royal Orleans, which is a great funk song, which, funnily enough, was inspired by a true incident involving the band in a hotel. The entire band were well known for destroying hotel rooms, especially in their early days. They couldn't even make it a night at a hotel room without being charged for the destruction of every piece of wallpaper of the place.
Didn't John Bonham come to your hotel room door once, and he was taking a big sword and smashed the door and dragged you out of bed and left you in the hotel?
Maybe. Maybe he did. But does that make him any less of a drummer? I mean, or a man? So I didn't notice.
But John Paul Jones, he was the clean member of the band. Before this album, he was spending time at the Royal Orleans Hotel, the very famous Royal Orleans, and accidentally lit the place on fire with a cigarette. Robert Plant made the song Royal Orleans to be poking fun at John Paul Jones, insinuating that he was messing around with the drag queen who put their cigarette out and lit the room on fire. John Paul Jones heavily denies this, saying that they were a friend of the band and they all knew this person, and accuses the lyrics of being openly homophobic and transphobic. But that's why the lyrics keep alluding to someone named Whiskers.
Now love gets hot, but fight for city border. We just did that real life.
But the true centerpiece of this album, other than the obelisk on the album cover, is the opening track, the epic Achilles' Last Stand. And this song is so amazing that to many fans, the rest of this album just doesn't stand a chance. But this song kind of represented the band's thought process at the time. Robert Plant even had the cast on his leg, just like Achilles had the arrow to the foot. And many people say this is pretty much the first Iron Maiden song having a bass gallop and heavy guitar riffs beginning to end. But to me, the strongest part of the song is actually Jimmy Page's guitar solo in it. This is probably my favorite solo of all time from him, one of my favorite solos.
I wanted to do something which was a guitar epic. Really everything sort of thrown at it that I could do. The initial guitars were done, and then all the overdubs are done in more or less one night.
This album cover and the pictures that went with the album and promotion of them with this strange obelisk that is shown really did them no favors with the satanic panic crowd that already thought that they were a bunch of crazy occultists worshiping the devil. And there's even creepy stories about this obelisk when they were promoting the album.
While I was away, my wife received one of these on the table, and they had a tape machine running, and the children were singing, right? And this is the gospel truth. When they played the tape back, there was another sound on the tape. That's something to think about. So she put it outside the house. She won't have it in the house.
Now, yes, the album has some problems with it, more than almost any of their album from them.
It was a wheelchair album.
And it does not help at all that the one song they picked to be a single and representation of this album, Candy Store Rock, is by far the weakest song on here. The one style that I felt like the band never was great at was trying to do old school rock and roll Elvis style swinging songs. And I get it, the band were good friends with Elvis, he was their biggest inspiration. I don't know what it is, but these type of songs just do not work for me, and most people seem to agree that this song was the weakest on the album. For whatever reason, Robert Plant thinks this is the only good song on here, and the only song where his vocals sound good was by far his worst vocals on here. But I'd honestly recommend this album more than any other Led Zeppelin album to the people that just want a beginning-to-end rocking album. To the metal peckins that hate anything soft at all, this is going to be the album for you. But this album was considered dinosaur, especially with the songs that were literally inspired by the dinosaurs of their era. But it was pure chaos on the road. If it wasn't John Bonham struggling not to drink a beer and not eat food, it was either Jimmy Page shooting up, or it was Robert Plant desperately trying to sing in key. The only one holding things together was John Paul Jones. They had to cancel so many shows, and still with all of that, with all the chaos, all the riots at their shows, they still were beyond successful on this tour. And when the band performed at Day on the Green, their manager Peter Grant actually mafia-style assaulted the promoter getting the entire band arrested. The manager Peter Grant and Jimmy Page just would not give Robert Plant the time he demanded to have off and spend with his family, and that would truly come to bite them all in the ass, the tragedies that would go into making it In Through the Outdoor.
Wasn't it particularly bad at the time?
It was probably, yes, it probably rose to a head. But the upshot was that we put out a good album of the people who were there doing it. You know, Robert and I were at rehearsals first, taking delivery of this big Yamaha organ synthesizer thing. I mean, it was 3 keyboards and full pedal board. And so, as is always the way with me, I was very inspired with this new instrument. So I just started writing stuff, and I had it delivered to the rehearsal rooms, and I was there early playing it.
Yeah.
And then Robert turned up next, and by the time Bonzo and Jimmy had turned up, we kind of finished the album, not written most of the album.
They put it out in a paper bag.
It still follows on from the early days of getting hammered by the press and saying, all right, we'll put it out in a brown paper bag then.
It sold unfashionably 10 million copies as well. It's found it really funny how people used to knock it and then go, oh, sorry, you'd look through their records, oh no, that's not really there. That's just a brown paper bag.
If you thought Presence was too samey, this album is the complete polar opposite in literally every single way. There is very little to no hard rocking elements on this album, and this time around, John Paul Jones and Robert Plant, who were very absent in the last album, almost entirely run this album. Where there was once a big focus on drums and guitars, there is now nothing but a focus on the vocals and keyboards and bass and more rhythmic sounding, more pop sounding songs. And I still kind of don't know how to feel about this album. It's definitely the one I listen to the least. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things after the fact, you listen to this in the catalog of Led Zeppelin and say, well, this is just a stupid 80s pop album, until you see the year it was released, that it predates and inspired everything that came after. And there's tons of songs on this album that are on the radio to this day that get grouped in with 80s hard rock hit songs. Songs like Fool in the Rain, which inspired the hell out of songs like Misunderstanding by Genesis. In fact, Phil Collins owes his entire career to songs off this album.
Light in your eye that keeps shining, like a star that can't wait for a night. I hate to think I've been blinded, baby. What can I see tonight?
But my ear still really loves Led Zeppelin when they were more of a hard rock band, so I kind of missed that on this album. And songs like In the Evening kind of scratch that itch, which is definitely the best song on this album for having such a great heavy riff, where the keyboards dominate that. And when the band tries to do a lengthy epic on here, Carouselambra, I don't know if it turns out right. It's so much Casio keyboard overload, it feels like it's stuffing it down your face. And it ends up not really sounding like Led Zeppelin, more like circus music. There was a lot of tragedy went into this album, and the big reason as to why Robert Plant was kind of more involved in the writing of this, they never wanted to slow down the momentum of this band, despite him begging and pleading to spend more time with his family until it was too late. Robert's son had suddenly tragically died of an infection while he was on the road, and he not only missed his son dying because he was working with the band at the time, the band was also suddenly banned from England entirely for tax issues, inspiring the lyrics to the song All of My Love, which was a dedication to him. Now, Jimmy Page despised this song, and it really is kind of more of a Robert Plant solo piece. In fact, this whole album feels more like a John Paul Jones, Robert Plant solo album, but it really is the emotional highlight and the biggest hit off this album for a reason.
I think it was just paying tribute to the joy that he gave us as a family. You know, and in a crazy way still does. And both my wife and I, we had strong families, so, and good support. I mean, John Bonham from Zeppelin and his wife Pat, they were magnificent with us.
The cup is raised, the toast is made yet again. One voice is clear above the din.
Now, old heads and of course the Led Zeppelin purists of that original sound will always throw out this album. But I do see the magic in it, and I do see what it stands for. And for them to go out on this album to truly change the next decade of music after seeing stagnant on Presence, I can't deny that this album is very important. Fans hated it. Critics were whatever about it, but the sales made it their #1 most selling album at the time. But more than anyone else, Bonzo was into the outdoors this time. Who can take a wild guess as to what vice he was hopelessly addicted to at this time? No one will know. And he was collapsing multiple times on stage, claiming that he'd ate too much or drank too much. And Jimmy Page and Bonzo kind of hated the direction of this album anyways, plotting that no matter what, the two of them will make sure the next release was going to be more like Physical Graffiti, but even heavier, more like that. A true return to the hard rock form. Until, unfortunately, one night on tour, John Bonham had way too much to drink and too much to eat, and he fell asleep in the wrong position and choked on his own vomit. Even if Bonzo didn't die, it's kind of obvious that at best the band was going to do one more album, their Abbey Road, but as things were, this is a very respectful, amazing, consistent discography. And yeah, a lot of people are going to say, why don't you talk about Coda, because they released a posthumous album that was mostly just leftover B-side material. Coda is nothing but leftover crap that was never good enough in the first place, and that sounds like that. There is nothing great on here at all, and it's basically just a collection of all Led Zeppelin's worst songs and songs that actually suck. So screw that album, it doesn't count. Bonzo wasn't there. The band considers real Led Zeppelin to be the four of them, and that's why they retired and they'll never get back together except for maybe one-off shows here and there.
Because it was an inventive band that was improvising, each concert that we did was different. So it wasn't feasible that you could create honestly at that point of time what Led Zeppelin was doing with another drummer, because what would you say? Would you say, well, we want you to learn this bit that we did on this night and this bit, which was something which was created of the event in a live situation.
The rest of the members have scattered about and done things throughout the years, like their own solo projects. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got together for a little bit. And there was the disastrous Live Aid performance in 1985, where all the hype was around Led Zeppelin getting back together, having virtually no rehearsals or preparation for this, and every member being at their absolute worst at this point, with Jimmy Page performing so sloppily, drunken and high, borderline falling asleep on stage, probably being the worst part of it, and Robert Plant struggling to sing in key to save his life. But those two asshats were the worst part of this performance, seemed to put all the blame on the drummers for this, which were two drummers for some reason. One of them being Phil Collins, who gets the most amount of blames because at one point he comes in kind of early. But at least the drummers are playing in time. Those two, on the other hand, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, aren't playing on time, in key, and at some points not even playing at all, and it's laughable. It is so sloppy and terrible that rock and roll just sounds like avant-garde noise.
Are you surprised that it finally went off?
What?
Also in 1988 they had reunited with the original band and actually brought in the son of John Bonham, Jason Bonham, to play drums. This was a disaster as well, so people thought Led Zeppelin was closed. Robert Plant, more than anyone else, was fighting the idea of doing a reunion. But the three of them and John Bonham's son Jason decided that they needed to end Led Zeppelin on something that they could finally close the book on and not be an embarrassment. So they got together in the early 2000s, actually rehearsed, perfected their craft, decided not to go on for 3.5 grueling hours and do tons of improv. Just the meat and potatoes Led Zeppelin songs that Robert Plant could actually still sing. And Celebration Day was a true celebration. Yeah, there's a lot of studio trickery, especially with the vocals, but this is the band mostly still sounding good, them still performing well. It's a good swan song to the band. What's insane is before they did this performance, the band was offered so much money and ideas to do this get back together, and of course Robert Plant was fighting it every step of the way, that they actually considered doing it with Steven Tyler from Aerosmith instead, which is a stupid idea. I can't believe Jimmy Page even considered that. It's the dumbest thing he ever thought of doing. That's right, the dumbest thing he ever thought about doing. The dumbest thing he ever did. There's nothing else dumber that he ever did. But I completely understand where Robert Plant's coming from. He recently did a performance of Stairway to Heaven, and it's not good, guys. It really isn't. You know, you'll see some people that are shills that'll try to say it sounds good, but he knows it's gone. The magic's gone. It would just be undoing the good finale that was Celebration Day. Now, the whole thing with Robert Plant's complicated because obviously the band would be a mess if they just continued to make music and live shows. But most of the band and most of the fans have wanted them to continue on for years. But Robert Plant has just been the biggest stick in the mud with anything to do with this band, to the point that in the 80s he just outwardly disliked the band and has claimed that he's hated Stairway to Heaven for years. Mixture of it being overplayed to him and too many people asking him about the song and trying to tie him down to that song and the band. And to be honest, the guy just kind of has a hipster attitude about him constantly. But at the same time, I kind of get it where he doesn't want to be tethered down. And the stagnation of the later years of the band and being tied to Led Zeppelin really bothers the hell out of him. But then again, he is such a hipster and wants to reinvent the wheel so goddamn often. I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to turn the Immigrant Song into an all-acoustic folk song, and then Stairway to Heaven into like a heavy metal song.
It's like doing a reggae version of Stairway to Heaven.
Well, a lot of fans out there would think that that would be completely sacrilegious.
This band is so legendary that they only did 8 real albums that didn't even make it to the 1980s. And within the course of basically 1 decade, people still talk about them as one of the greatest bands of all time for a reason.
Would you ever play again with these guys?